On the night of our 20th anniversary, he handed me a card. Not one with roses or a promise, but a letter that said, "I want a divorce." In front of our family, our friends, and everyone who had watched us grow old together, he smiled as if he were announcing a promotion. He told the room I needed to move out by tomorrow. I took a breath, picked up the microphone he had just let fall from his hand, and said 3 words that made the room go still. "You picked wrong." People expected tears. People expected the kind of scene they see in movies. The woman begging, the shouting, the collapse. But I had waited and watched. I had the truth, and justice has little patience for theatrics. That night would not be what he had rehearsed. It would be the night his plan broke. We met when we were 22. He called himself a dreamer, and I was the steady anchor. The numbers behind his plans, the hand that paid the bills when a new idea failed. For 2 decades, we built a life full of small luxuries and quiet routines. Saturday markets, 2 vacations a year, a small cabin by the lake. We never had children. It was a private pain for both of us, a door that never opened and then closed without much explanation. We learned to live with that missing breath between us. At first, he was kind. He loved bold things. A new coat, a spicy restaurant, a conversation about future possibilities. I loved his laugh, the way he read the room and made people feel seen. Over time, though, I noticed a pattern. I planned. He deferred. I gave structure. He promised spontaneity. When my father died, he held my hand and dried my tears. When my mother needed help with taxes, he told jokes so she wouldn't worry. He was my partner, in the way people talk about partners in movies. Or so I thought. Small things changed. The bedtime kisses became brief. His phone would be face down, screen lit in the dark. He started spending more time working late. He stopped calling me by the pet names he once used. When friends asked how we were after so many years, he said with that same easy smile, "We're fine." But I felt a cold space growing where warmth used to live. The first night I suspected something was wrong, he returned from a business dinner smelling of perfume that was not mine. He said it was the guest in the elevator. An assistant, a client. He said it loosely, like a detail that didn't matter. My instinct tightened. One Saturday, I watered the window plants, and his phone buzzed on the counter. He left it unattended. For a second, I saw the calendar alert, "Call L, 11 a.m. I asked casually who L was. He froze. His left eye twitched, a small thing I had learned to read like a traffic light. "Oh, that's Lara, a colleague from the new project," he said, a practiced tone. "She's in from the city." He sounded rehearsed. I let it be that week, because suspicion does not justify accusation. But then came the nighttime whispering I could not ignore. Muffled calls in the hallway, a voice in the dark that was not as usual. The next morning, his shirt carried a scent of expensive perfume. I waited. I watched. One afternoon, my friend called me. I saw him at the mall with a woman, blonde, about 30. They looked close. I felt something inside me fracture, but I breathed and smiled and asked nothing. You don't challenge a pattern until you know the shape of it. When I finally opened his laptop while he was at work, it took a password guess before the browser popped open. There were searches he would never have made if truth were not already in his pocket. How to divorce quietly, how to divide assets, how to make a public announcement divorce. The words were clinical, and the web history was recent, the last 3 weeks. Just a few clicks deeper, and I found messages, tender, planning messages to someone named Lara, a new calendar invitation, ballroom, anniversary speech. For a man who hated fuss, booking a ballroom at a luxury hotel for a private anniversary was out of character. For a man courting someone else, it was the perfect stage. I listened to a message on his phone. His mother's voice was on the answering machine telling him, "Everything is in place." They were talking about arrangements as if arranging furniture. They spoke in a calm, measured tone, like professionals planning a takeover. My husband, my partner of 20 years, plotting my erasure as if I were a line item. The qualifier of cruelty is the need for public humiliation. They wanted a show where I would be offered a choice under pressure, where social embarrassment and a staged guilt would push me to sign away property and peace. The plan was as cruel as it was meticulous. A boss and colleagues present, a lawyer on standby, and a young, perfect woman waiting in the wings. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I copied everything. Messages, calendar entries, receipts. I saved them to my own account and then put the device back exactly where I'd found it. He must not know that I knew. Knowledge is most powerful when it arrives quietly at your side. Then an opportunity. A letter arrived from my aunt in Europe. She had left me a small inheritance, an apartment in a city I had never visited, and a bank account that meant independence. I didn't open that letter in front of anyone. I sat with it, with the silence it brought, and realized my future was no longer solely tied to the man at the table. I met with a friend, someone who had become a lawyer later in life. We spoke in plain rooms with cheap coffee and serious faces. I told my friend the facts, and she listened, then smiled with the kind of calm you see on people who practice law. "You have time, and you have more power than you think," she said. She explained premarital property, gifts, and how the law reads whose name appears first on a deed. Two other things happened in rapid succession. I confirmed the condo deed had been a gift to me long before our wedding, a paper trail that would matter, and I took small, rational steps. I moved enough from the joint account into one that only I could access. I assembled the inheritance documents, and I prepared the folder I would carry to the ballroom. I did not shout the truth from the rooftops. I let the plan grow like a seed under the soil. A quiet preparation, not threats, not revenge, a legal dismantling of his plot. There is a kind of power that is silent and precise. It does not need to shout because it is built to last. Meanwhile, he rehearsed his speech. I heard fragments through the door. 20 years. Mistakes. Honesty. His words were choreographed like any good manipulator's, half truth, half performance. He believed that staging my collapse would force my hand. He imagined everyone would watch me shrink in front of them and agree that a new life with the younger woman was reasonable. He did not know that I had already enlisted a quiet ally. The notary who told me the deed, the bank that confirmed the inheritance would be cleared to my account within the week, and a friend who would be in the crowd with copies of messages if needed. I knew the exact currency of truth. Documents. The Watergate ballroom glimmered in crystal lights. 100 people in soft dresses and dark suits, clinking glasses, congratulating us for a milestone that only in minutes would stop being ours. He loved the attention, the reflection of his success in other people's eyes. He had chosen a stage to be king. He stood behind the podium with practiced ease and launched into a speech that sounded like it had been written by a committee of his enablers. A few polite claps, then the knife. After much thought, I have realized we are not the same people anymore. I want to begin a new chapter with someone else. He announced divorce as if it were a new product launch. He said I would be moving out, that the condo would be better with someone younger, brighter, more lively. The camera phones came out, not for a toast, but for a spectacle. The room leaned in, gasps, a pressed murmur. And then, in my calmest voice, I rose, walked to the podium, and took the microphone. He looked stunned, like an actor whose cue had been stolen. He expected screams, perhaps a fainting fit. He had rehearsed all outcomes but one, that I would speak with the clarity of someone who knew the truth. "Thank you," I said. I was always under the impression that anniversaries were for celebrating what we had built. But you are right about one thing. We are not the same people. I knew about your plans for weeks, your calls, your reservations, your messages, all of it. The room's temperature shifted. I pulled the folder from my bag and laid it on the lectern. This condo, I said, opening the deed and placing it in front of the room, was a gift to me before our marriage. The title is in my name. These documents prove it. Also, 3 weeks ago, my Aunt Josephine left me some assets. I do not need to sign anything here tonight. The murmur turned into a low roar. Faces changed. His mother's smile froze into a thin line of panic. The lawyer, who had been sitting in the corner, slid down in his chair. People started whispering. Someone began to record. He tried to interrupt. He tried 1,000 different tones. The composure he'd rehearsed turned into a flail. He reached for the microphone, but I set it down gently and continued. I won't be humiliated. I refuse to be coerced into giving up what is mine. If anyone would like to contest this, the proper venue is not a celebration. It's the courtroom. The word courtroom landed like a stone. A hush followed. For a man who had planned a public spectacle, the irony was deliciously sharp. He had created an event that would now be the evidence against him. Then the second part of the play. I told the room about the messages. I read a few lines aloud, not to humiliate, but to reveal the plan. You arranged a lawyer to present me with papers here, after your speech, I said. You planned to make these guests your witnesses. You intended my embarrassment to be the pressure that made me sign. I placed the logged screenshots and calendar reminders on the podium. The reaction was immediate. Colleagues who had admired his leadership shifted respect into disgust. Friends of long acquaintance leaned forward, scanning the documents. His mother, who had been smug for months, suddenly looked very small. The young woman who had teased at the edges of the ballroom, the one he had introduced as an assistant, looked for the exits. Someone began filming. The clip would go out into the world in minutes. Social truth is cruel and efficient. He tried to salvage the moment by pleading, by blaming me for being dramatic. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said. We had plans. He protested that he had been unhappy. But you cannot sell an honest story when the evidence is stacked before 100 witnesses. Sierra, the young woman, found herself at the center. She'd expected a future house and a network of easy smiles. Instead, she was a live footnote in a story about cruelty. Angry voices rose, and one of his colleagues placed a hand on his arm and said softly but firmly, I don't know if I can support this. By the time the evening ended, the party had dissolved into scandal. People left and many would not pick up his calls the next day. The recording had been posted within an hour. It racked up views and comments in minutes. The man who had wanted to humiliate had become the man humiliated. Within days, his company was fielding questions. The CEO, who had been present at the ballroom, reached out. Reputation matters. I kept my silence publicly. The law is not a theater. I met with a lawyer who guided me through necessary filings. His debts, some incurred behind my back and in my name, were exposed in the process. The lender's statements, the transfers to unknown accounts, the signed checks, all showed patterns he could not explain away. In court, the truth of the deed proved decisive. The judge, a woman with a sharp gaze, listened to the chain of documents and ruled that the property was premarital. She divided marital assets accordingly. She took into account that he had used marital funds for personal relationships. In the end, he left with far less than he had planned. He kept some things that were indisputably marital, but the condo remained mine. The loans he had taken out were declared his obligation. The man who had planned a show had not counted on the quiet power of documentation. He had not counted on a woman who waited and prepared, who matched cruelty with resolve. Karma in this case did not look like vengeance. It looked like consequence. A fall from the pedestal that had been created for him by himself. A year later, I live somewhere with a balcony that catches the morning sun. I moved on not because I wanted to punish, but because I wanted to keep living. My publishing house, yes, the small venture I had dreamed about, began with 2 employees and a handful of books. It grew slowly, a patient thing like a well-watered plant. People ask if I feel avenged. I do not call it vengeance. I call it restoration. I do not relish his downfall. I savor the quiet that comes with being free of manipulation. I took what was mine, and I built from there. The world is not always kind to those who wait patiently, but sometimes patience is the only kind of strategy that delivers real results. If you heard something that resonated, tell me where you're listening from. I love seeing which cities my stories reach. If my story moved you, please consider supporting my channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing stories like this to life. Don't forget to subscribe and check the recommendations on your screen. There are 2 more stories waiting that I know you'll love. Until next time, remember, dignity is not silence. Speak with evidence. Live with courage.